I'm Louise Gleich, and I'm the acting head of the Modern Slavery Policy Unit at the CSJ and Justice and Care. And we're just releasing a new report looking at the support available for victims of modern slavery. So our new report is A Path to Freedom and Justice, and this is looking at the support that's available for victims of modern slavery, specifically adult victims. And this comes from a piece of work we've done the past year. And we started this really with the challenge we have of modern slavery, where we've got organised criminals working across the country and really continuing to act with impunity. We've got thousands of victims being identified, thousands of offenders thought to be involved, but really only a handful of convictions. And what we found in a piece of research we did in 2020 was that care for those who've been exploited, for the victims of modern slavery, isn't just good for them, but it also unlocks progress against the criminals because it enables them to give evidence against those who've exploited them. But what we also found in 2020 was that the slavery support system we have isn't up to the challenge. We've had numerous reviews and changes over the years, but it still isn't doing what it needs to do. And so what we've said with this report is that what we really need is a new vision. We need a much more strategic approach to respond to victims as victims of crime, first and foremost, and also recognizing the role that they have in bringing perpetrators to justice. So we looked at 4 key areas in the research. And the first one was about early engagement, that first interaction that victims have with the public authorities or the police or so on. And what's really clear is that for many victims, fear is a huge barrier to them accessing support or coming forward to the police, whether that's fear from their traffickers, whether that's fear of the police themselves, or fear about deportation. And that really stops people from trusting the authorities. Connected with that, we also found through the research is that it takes time to build trust with victims, to overcome that fear and help them to engage with the support systems and with the criminal justice process. And just one of the cases that we encountered in the research, the police in Manchester told us it took them 6 months engaging with one particular person and building trust with her before she was able to come forward. And that's just one example. So some of the recommendations we're making around this area in the report is around establishing places of safety where victims can be taken in a locality near to where they are, where they can receive support, and you can have time there to build up a relationship of trust with the authorities and with support workers before they enter the rest of the support system. And they can think about the options that they have. And also around upskilling those professionals who are designated as first responders in the slavery system so that they're better able to identify victims, better able to build really good trusting relationships with victims so that they are able to enter the support system. Second area we looked at was the concept of needs-based care and the kind of support that victims are receiving in the system. And unfortunately, what we found is that although there's this aspiration that care and support should be needs-based, actually too often it's eligibility rather than need, which dictates the kind of support that victims receive. And we also saw that that means that support providers and mainstream services like the health service are really struggling to meet the needs that victims have, which we also found are becoming increasingly complex. Many more of them need access to things like mental health services and addiction services. We also found connected with that a lot of statutory services still don't have a full understanding of what their responsibilities are, which means that this becomes difficult for them to provide that support. We also found that the support system we have is much too focused on process. There's a lot of bureaucracy rather than looking at the impact the support is having on the individual victims that they're caring for. So our recommendations in this area really hone in on that. We really think the system needs to focus much more on the outcomes for victims from support, helping to reduce their vulnerability to being exploited again in the future, helping to prepare them for a life of independence and a safe future. And in part of that is around making sure that they have 12 months of support after they're confirmed as a victim and leave to remain if there's someone who needs it. We're also recommending that we need to integrate the support with mainstream services much more. Not that they become one and the same thing, but that there should be much better working together and partnership between the specialist slavery support service and local authorities and mainstream services So we need to upskill local authorities so they understand what their responsibilities are, and we need to have much better partnership and multi-agency working between all those providing support to victims. The third area that we looked at in the research is the quality and the efficiency of the referrals and decision-making process in the National Referral Mechanism for Victims of Modern Slavery. This is a system which formally recognises someone as a victim, and it's administered by the Home Office. And what we found is not news to many people. We've had chronic and extensive delays in this system going back years now. And at the moment, it's an average of about 500 days for an individual victim to get that final decision, recognising them as a victim. And these delays have a really significant impact on victims' recovery. It harms their mental health. It really holds them back from moving on into an independent future. And as well as being bad for victims' recovery, of course, it's poor value for money, because it means some people are getting stuck in the system, which means that other people are not able to enter and get the support they need. Possibly connected to these delays, we also found that there's really patchy quality of the information that's going in to the SCA, the single competent authority that makes these decisions, and really inefficient processes for gathering more information. So the initial information they're being provided isn't always up to standard, and they don't have really good ways of gathering more. We found particularly that police and support providers weren't being consistently asked for information, and they didn't know how to send information in to make sure it got to the person making a decision. So what we're recommending here is that decision making should be much more independent from the Home Office. We need decision makers who have qualifications and expertise in modern slavery, so they know what they're dealing with. We made a couple of recommendations that are much more short term and that could be easily implemented quickly. And then on the long term, we're recommending that we should move NRM to much more independence, whether that be locally based in multi-agency approaches or through an arm's length body. And we need to really set this apart from the Home Office. We're also saying, connected with that, that we need to focus on tackling this backlog of cases that currently sit in the NRM. So we need some specialist teams, we need some fast track protocols so that we know how to deal with cases that may have got stuck because there isn't very much information, and maybe there won't be the possibility of gathering more information. We need to take a more systematic approach to those. And we think actually taking the resources that have been put into the new competent authority, if we took those and applied them to the whole backlog in the whole system, that would be more effective. And we also think we need more better approach to gathering information, so we get more information into the system that's of higher quality. In particular, we want to recommend that there should be a designated person dealing with each and every NRM case, so that a police officer or a support provider who has more information knows exactly who the decision maker is and can communicate directly with them to share that information. Moving on to the fourth area that we looked at, this is the final one. We really saw that there continue to be gaps between the support systems and the criminal justice system. And what we really need to do is to see much more integration to bridge those gaps. So we saw a lack of communication and a lack of trust still between the police and the support workers and support providers, when actually both of them have a role in safeguarding victims and helping victims towards recovery. So we would want to see much more communication between the two. What we did see, though, was where police forces had strong leadership on modern slavery, where there was a priority given to modern slavery, that resulted not only in specialist investigative teams and better a criminal justice approach, but also much more of a focus on victims in the policing, much more partnership working. And those things together are all key to seeing the police and the criminal justice system much more responsive to victims' needs. We also found that where there are these support programs in place, that has an impact by enabling more victims to engage as witnesses, by providing intelligence and evidence to police and really progressing those criminal cases forward. So our recommendations in this area are making sure that we have guidance to both support providers and to the police around how we report victims who go missing, how we make sure that the Police National Computer has consistent protocols in place for how we record when someone's gone missing who's also a victim of modern slavery, so that we have a joined up approach across the whole country. and also having modern slavery as a key priority for police forces across the country, with specialist investigative teams, specialist victim liaison officers who are able to make sure that the police response to victims is everything that it can be. And finally, a recommendation that more police forces should partner with specialist charities so that we have victim support delivered together between the police and the specialist charities, so that both criminal justice system, the investigation, and the needs of the victim can be given due priority. And just to finish with a quote, we spoke to so many survivors who had received help and were really thankful and beneficial of that help. But there are so many more victims who are not coming forward and not able to access the support. So we need to get it right so that we protect people for the future.